if someone does a will by LegalZoom, there's a good chance that they're going to end up paying me a lot to clean it up on the back end.
So like I'm sure there's things like that you're aware of, like maybe like LegalZoom that does some type of things like estate planning. So like what's kind of like the difference between like things like LegalZoom and like someone like yourself? And like what makes you different from something like LegalZoom?
Yeah, so I jokingly refer to LegalZoom as my deferred client compensation payment program because
What is this? What do you mean by that?
meaning basically that if someone does a will by LegalZoom, there's a good chance that they're going to end up paying me a lot to clean it up on the back end because the fact of the matter is when you're doing DIY estate planning, you don't know what you don't know. It's very easy to make mistakes or miss certain issues. I generally don't recommend LegalZoom for estate planning. It can result in some bad outcomes. That said, there are certain circumstances where maybe it'll work fine. That's just one of those things that I would rather, if it's up to me, I don't want to leave that to chance. I want to get it done the right way the first time and not leave a bunch of grief and heartache for my kids to sort out on the back end if I did something wrong in setting it up on my own.
I think too, like you said, like LegalZoom is like very cookie cutter, and it may not be up to date with all the changes that the state of Texas has every year potentially, and then every family has got like different assets, and it may not be able to like help with everything.
Sure, yeah. There are a lot of different things to consider. Like you said, it's cookie cutter forms. You're paying a price for forms. You're not paying for an estate planning attorney who can help you negotiate the unique issues that a family might have, like a kid with special needs, for instance. That's a big issue to plan around because you don't want to give someone who has special needs a inheritance of any kind outright because it could mess up their eligibility for public benefits. So there's a necessity to engage in planning for that. Now, there are certain circumstances where maybe the vanilla LegalZoom is going to work for you. I've just seen a lot of plans like that go wrong, so I generally recommend against it.
So when you mean like it goes wrong, like can you give me? I don't know if you can share like any examples of like you said you've helped kind of help people like clean it up. Like can you kind of maybe you can't give specific examples, but maybe like a general idea of like where things go wrong with like people who do LegalZoom plans.
A lot of times people will print forms off of the internet and they will edit them as they see fit and create lots of ambiguities that require a judgment from a court clarifying what the issue is. A lot of times they're not executed properly, so you have to execute a will in a very certain and particular way. And a lot of times people will come to me with these documents that haven't been signed right and might not even be valid at all because they don't have the appropriate number of signatures, or maybe they weren't notarized, so we have to bring in extra witnesses, and it becomes more difficult.
Okay, so like kind of the two common issues that I'm hearing is like one is just like it's just ambiguous as to what it means, and then two, they may have not done all the right procedures from like, for example, like you're saying, it has to get publicly notarized or some type of like have certain number of witnesses to say like this is or the documentation isn't quite perfect.
Right. It's when people start monkeying with the forms that bad things can happen, and then when they fail to get them signed properly, that can create a lot of extra issues on the back end. Also, you'll see people writing handwritten wills, which are legal. You can have a handwritten will. So you could take a napkin, a cocktail napkin, and write a will. And that's valid as long as it's in your handwriting and it's signed by you. Problem with that is that it doesn't have all of the necessary legal language to make it efficient to probate, and usually end up having to do a lot of cleanup work on the back end.
Okay, so it's valid, but it's also very hard to also enforce.
It's hard to probate. In fact, a lot of times it can cost 3-4 times as much to probate a handwritten will as one that's drawn up properly.
Okay, so your heirs will pay for it on the back end of like having the fees that are associated with that.
Pretty much, yeah. Because it doesn't have any of the language that you want to have in a will, like appointing an executor or appointing an executor to act independently, or having a residue clause, which means that you end up basically having to do a probate of a will plus an intestate probate, which is the kind of probate that you do when there is no will. So it's almost like two double probates in a lot of cases. So it can
Okay.
spiral into a big mess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.